everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my top books of 2022. I would also love to hear some of your top books of 2022, so make sure to comment those down below. Coming in at number 10 is A Perfect Silhouette by Judith Miller. The year is 1850 and Melly has just moved to Manchester, New Hampshire to get a job working at the mills. Her family has fallen on hard times and she wasn't making enough money with her tutoring job, and she hopes to be able to make more money working at the mills and send money home. Melly is staying in a boarding house with 19 other girls and stays in a room with 4 other girls. Each of these girls have problems of their own and even try to blackmail Melly. Even though Melly is making a decent wage, just under $4 a week, she would like another job to send more money home. One evening, Melly goes into a photography shop and she asks the owner if she can do paper cuttings. These paper cuttings would be cheaper than regular photographs, and they would also bring people into the store, and by bringing people into the store, they would be able to buy something other than the paper cuttings, and this would also help Melly, and this would also help the photography store owner. Once the photography store owner sees Melly's work, he agrees that she can come every evening and do paper cuttings for 5 cents a paper cutting. Morgan Stark is the son of William Stark, and William Stark is the owner of the mills. Morgan has just returned home from his schooling to be an engineer, and his father wants him to take over the business of the mills. But before Morgan agrees to do that, he wants to work undercover in the mills to see how he can better the working conditions. He will go by the name William Morgan so that no one can easily put it together that his father is the owner. His parents are a little hesitant at first to let him do this, but eventually they both agree. One evening when Melly is doing her paper cuttings, Morgan walks in and is fascinated with her paper cuttings. Not only is Morgan fascinated with her paper cuttings, but Morgan is also fascinated with Melly. Morgan offers to walk her home, but Melly doesn't want anyone to think they are keeping company with each other, so Morgan agrees that he will walk behind her from a distance so that nothing bad happens to her. Over time, Morgan comes into the shop night after night, and slowly Morgan and Melly begin to fall in love. However, Melly knows Morgan as William Morgan and not Morgan Stark. One evening, everything that Morgan has been hiding from her comes out into the open, and Melly isn't sure that she will ever be able to trust Morgan again. I really enjoyed reading this book. I had never heard about paper cutting, so it was really interesting to have a story centered around paper cutting. And to be honest, I didn't even know what paper cutting was, so I had to look it up. So I'm going to leave a link in the description if you're interested in seeing more about paper cutting. But if you don't want to click the link, I'll just leave a picture here of what paper cutting looks like. It was also really interesting to see how the author tried to keep her writing within the time period and not just use words that we're familiar with. One example would be that the girls at the boarding house wanted to check their hair in the looking glass. Coming in at number 9 is the duology All That Really Matters and All That It Takes by Nicole Deese. In All That Really Matters, Molly McKenzie is a social media influencer and she has a goal to reach 1 million followers very soon. Her manager slash boyfriend found Molly an audition that would make her the host of a makeover show for underprivileged youth. This is exactly what Molly wants, but in order to get the job, she wants her resume to look good. So she sends in an application to work the summer for a transitional program for aged out foster kids. The director, Silas Whitaker, doesn't think Molly is fit for the job, so after the interview, he throws her application in the trash. But Molly doesn't give up that easily, so she comes back with activities and plans that she would want to do during the summer, and Silas Whitaker decides to give Molly a trial run. As Molly begins to make genuine connections with the girls at the house, she feels that everything is aligning perfectly for her to get the makeover job, but then suddenly her online life begins to fall apart in a way she never thought possible. I absolutely loved this fabulous and heartwarming story. One of my favorite things was seeing the progression in Molly and how she had to decide what really matters in life, being true to yourself or hiding behind a screen and being who everybody else wants you to be. All That It Takes is a continuation from All That It Matters, but it mainly focuses on Val, Molly's assistant, and Miles, Molly's brother. Val moved across the country to work with Molly and is renting the top of Miles' apartment. There is a major problem when she shows up and all of her plans are now up in the air. Since Val is now out of work, she decided to pursue a chance at an elite filmmaker's mentorship. Miles was on a short-term missions trip in Mexico, and when he gets back, he finds out that the church he was working for no longer needs him as a pastor, so they have assigned him to a local ministry that is really struggling, and Miles does not want the job, and he begins to put his time into other projects, including Val. But will pursuing Val come at a cost to what Miles really wants in life? Val also has to decide if her story is worth telling or if she will hide behind the camera and use other people's stories as a way of telling her story. Nicole Deese has a beautiful way of telling stories on things that truly matter. I absolutely loved these books. They were beautiful and heartwarming stories. Coming in at number 8 is Chasing Shadows by Lynn Austin. Lena and Peter live on a farm in the Netherlands and have a strong Christian faith. They have 3 kids, Ans, Wim, and McKee. Ans is tired of living on the farm and she thinks the life is dull and that the Christian life is just a bunch of rituals. Ans wants to move to the city named Leiden. Her mother does not want her to go. Ans' father knows that she is strong-willed and that is a great trait for Ans to have. He also encourages Lena to talk to her father about it, and Lena's father tells Lena that if she really loves Ans, that she should let Ans go to the city. When Anne gets to Leiden, she is able to get a job with Professor Huizinga, being a companion for his wife, Eloise. Eloise struggles with severe depression at times. Eloise can go for months at a time when she is happy, but the happier she is, the deeper her depression will be when it comes. Ans is able to live with Professor Huizinga and Eloise in their 4-story house. Ans and Eloise go on many outings together, and one of the outings they went to was to a coffee shop. Ans asks this waitress if there's anything fun to do in Leiden, and the waitress tells her that there's a dance tomorrow night and wants to set her up with a police officer named Eric. Ans agrees to it, and her and Eric hit it off, and they start spending more time together. Over in Cologne, Germany, Miriam's father has decided that him, Miriam, and his wife are going to leave Germany and go to the Netherlands because they are being persecuted as Jews, and he thinks the persecution is only going to get worse. They were to pack 1 suitcase each. Miriam packed clothes, candlesticks, photographs, and her violin. When they arrive in the Netherlands, they go to Westerbork, which is a camp for refugees. On the 3rd day at Westerbork, Miriam plays her violin for the first time. A young man named Avi is standing by listening, and he asks Miriam to continue when she asks him if he would like her to stop. He has been at the camp for 4 months and hopes to get a visa to go to Palestine. Miriam's father would like to stay in the Netherlands. Her father is a professor and he has been writing to many people in hopes of getting him a job teaching at a university. So every day, Miriam would play her violin and Avi would read a psalm to her. And over their time at Westerbork, Miriam and Avi began to fall in love. One day, Professor Huizinga asked Eloise how she would feel about guests coming to live in their home. She found out they were German, and she was a little apprehensive until she found out they were Jews who were refugees. Back at the camp, Miriam's father shares that he has now found a job in Leiden so that they can leave the camp. By the time Miriam and her father's visa has been approved, Miriam and Avi know that they want to spend the rest of their lives together. But his records are not approved to be able to leave the camp yet. As Miriam leaves Westerbork to go to Professor Huizinga's house, she hopes that she will be able to see Avi again one day. The night they arrive, Eloise wants to listen to music on the radio, but Professor Huizinga doesn't think that's a good idea, but Eloise turns on the radio anyways. The announcer has a terrible tone in his voice as if something terrible has happened. Eloise turns it off and Professor Huizinga tells everyone the Nazis have invaded Poland, they're bombing Warsaw, and they have broken their agreement with England and France. So war has been declared on Germany. Everyone has hope that Germany won't invade on the Netherlands since the Netherlands is neutral. Later that night, Eric comes to visit Ans. Ans tells Eric that they are hosting Jewish refugees in the house. Unknowingly for Ans, this is the beginning of her resistance work. Eric tells Ans that he is being called to military training to add to his training as a police officer. Unknowingly to Eric, this is the beginning of his training to work with the Nazis. As their relationship progresses, how will they deal with being on opposite sides of the war? This is a wonderful book and it has such a powerful story. Coming in at number 7 is The Auschwitz Photographer by Maurizio Onis and Lucia Kripa. In Poland in 1939, William Brass has been deported to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp for being a political activist. He has been assigned to work as the camp's photographer in the Political Identification Department Service and take identity pictures of prisoners as they arrive by the trainload. Brass soon discovers that his photography skills are in demand by the Nazi soldiers as well, who will get him to take pictures to send home to their families and girlfriends. Behind the camera, Brass is safe from the terrible fate that so many of the other prisoners meet. But over the course of 5 years, Brass captures many of the horrifying scenes of Auschwitz that will change him forever. From 1941 to 1945, he photographed and developed between 40,000 to 50,000 photographs. Many times the Nazis asked him to swear allegiance to Hitler, betraying his country, his friends, and everything he believed in. He always refused. Since this book is about Auschwitz, there are many triggers in this book. There's obviously death since it's about Auschwitz. There's also pictures in the book, and I'm not talking about the pictures on the front cover, but pictures where doctors are doing medical experiments on the prisoners, and the doctors are also describing the medical procedures. The only other trigger warning I will mention is they talked about skinning someone, but I don't think they skinned someone as a method of torture to get what they wanted. And when you read the book, you'll find out the specific thing that they wanted. But I will say that this is the most powerful book that I have ever read about Auschwitz. Coming in at number 6 is The Wish Book Christmas by Lynn Austin. This book is the sequel to If I Were You, and this book does not have any spoilers from the first book. Two single moms, Audrey and Eve, are celebrating Christmas in America now that the war is over with their two 5-year-old sons, Harry and Bobby. Harry and Bobby are also very excited for Christmas, but then the 1951 Sears Christmas catalog comes, and Harry and Bobby want every single toy from every single page. This really concerns Audrey and Eve, and they think that Harry and Bobby don't understand the true meaning of Christmas, Jesus' birthday. Audrey and Eve also don't want Harry and Bobby to become selfish, so they come up with the idea of their sons being wise men who will give 3 gifts to people that are in need. This is not an easy thing for them to do, but throughout the story they realize how important it is for them to do what they are doing. One thing Harry and Bobby can't find in the 1951 Sears Christmas catalog is a dad, and they both would really like a dad. So Audrey and Eve have to open themselves up to the possibility of marriage again, even though they might think it might be too soon or that they are undeserving of love. Something that I really loved about this Christmas story was that it was centered around giving, and it was so amazing to see the progression of these 2 little 5-year-old boys, about how they were dreading giving at the beginning of the book to at the end of the book, where they were constantly looking for ways to be able to give to others. I truly adored this heartwarming Christmas story. Coming in at number 5 is The Wedding Dress Sewing Circle by Jennifer Ryan. Grace, who lives in Aldhurst Village, has just found her mother's wedding dress. With the war going on, there are not enough clothing rations to buy a wedding dress. You either wear a dress you already have, your army uniform, or buy a used wedding dress, if one is available. At 24, Grace had almost given up hope of getting married, but then Lawrence proposed. The reason Lawrence proposed and wants to marry Grace is because Grace is a good vicar's daughter who will make a good vicar's wife. As Grace and her father are looking at her mother's wedding dress, they realize it is filled with holes and at the state it is in, it cannot be worn for a wedding. Grace's father suggests that Grace take the dress to the sewing circle to see what they can do about the dress. Cressida Westcott lives in London and is a designer and has a design house very close to her home. This allows her to put all of her time into her work. But with the war going on, lots of Cressida's clientele are leaving the city. Cressida feels like she could never leave the city. Her whole life is here in London. One of Cressida's friends asks her about the death of Eustace Westcott. Cressida said it was a much older brother who didn't approve that she wanted to make a life of her own and didn't like the man she was engaged to that died in the war many years ago. Cressida feels like she wouldn't be welcome in the Westcott home even with Eustace gone, but her niece and nephew still living there. The person who was supposed to propose to Violet Westcott was shot down over Malta and died. Now Violet thinks there are no eligible men left for her to marry. She saw Cressida, her aunt's name, in the magazine, and she has had a secret dream of always meeting her aunt, but her father has always forbidden it. Violet's brother Hugh is looking at the mail, and he gives Violet a letter that looks like a conscription letter. Violet opens the letter. It tells her that she is due at the conscription office in Canterbury next week. Violet is not happy with the idea of having to do factory work. She wants to do her part for the war by getting married and having sons who will govern the country. Hugh tells Violet that if she really wants to do her part for the war, she should go and be a part of the sewing circle instead of just being a figurehead, so Violet agrees to go to the next meeting. Cressida was sleeping when she heard the bombs being dropped and got out of her house just in time before the bombs destroyed her house. As she was running, her design house was bombed as well. Cressida was told to go to the Air Raid Precaution Center. When they asked her if she had anywhere to go, she said no. She didn't feel like she could rely on her friends here in London, and she didn't feel that she could have a place staying with her niece and nephew. But then she realized she escaped with only her life. She decided to call her niece and nephew at Aldhurst Manor, and they told her she was welcome to stay for as long as she liked. Violet is very excited to meet Cressida. Violet even invites Cressida to the sewing circle, and at first Cressida doesn't want to go, but then she finds out who is going to be there. One person is Grace, and Grace's father is Ben, and Ben's wife died 10 years ago, and Cressida and Ben were friends growing up, so Cressida decides that maybe she will go to the sewing circle after all. At the sewing circle, rehearsal, Grace pulls out her dress to see what the ladies can do to help fix it. As they are discussing the options, Violet and Cressida walk in. Cressida sees what they are working on and makes the suggestion to take apart the dress to see how much good fabric is left of it. Once they get the dress apart, Cressida agrees to help Grace with her dress, and she tells Grace to come to Aldhurst Manor at 8 p.m. on Friday, and Grace agrees. But Grace thinks back to the last time that she was at Aldhurst Manor, and the last time she saw Hugh. Hugh's father, Eustace, had said, "What's that dreadful vicarage daughter doing here? Get her out." As Cressida helps Grace with her dress, the sewing circle finds themselves mending dresses not only for Grace, but for brides across the country. A really interesting fact that I read in this book in the author's notes said, Eleanor Roosevelt heard about the shortage of wedding dresses and appealed to American women to donate their dresses to their fellow brides in need. Something I really love about Jennifer Ryan's writing is that she writes about lesser known things of the war that you can learn so much about, and this book was no different. Coming in at number 4 is The Librarian Spy by Madeline Martin. It is 1941, and Ava Harper is the librarian at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Ava has been offered a job in Lisbon, Portugal, working with an operation that obtains information from newspapers and texts in neutral places to help gather information about the Nazis. The reason the job is in Portugal is because Portugal has remained a neutral country and they are still able to get newspapers from France and Germany to photograph on microfilm where they can be sent back to Washington and analyzed. Elaine, also known as Helen, is married to her husband Joseph and lives in Lyon, France. She hopes that he will come home very soon. He has not been home in 2 days since they have had an argument. As curfew is approaching, she hears a knock at the door. It is a lady looking for Pierre to make her a new identity card so that she can be safe. Elaine has no idea who Pierre is, but in the heat of the moment, she gives this lady her identity card. Not only did Elaine give this lady her identity card, but she also gave her some clothes and food rations. Elaine realizes now without her identity card she cannot go to the police to look for Peter, so she goes to Joseph's best friend Etienne for help. When she is on her way to Etienne's house, the police stop and ask her for her identity card. Without her identity card, she can easily be arrested, but Etienne comes out of the house, gives Elaine her identity card, so she is safe. After this occurrence, Elaine is at Etienne's house and finds out that Joseph was arrested because he was a part of the resistance. Elaine also wants to join the resistance and she will do anything to end the war, free the soldiers, and bring her husband home. The part I was really looking forward to was seeing how Ava and Elaine's story would connect, and they were connected in such a powerful way. They both went above and beyond in their jobs and they weren't required to do that, but if they wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't have had this connecting piece in the story. I absolutely adored this book. This story was incredibly fascinating and captivating. Madeline Martin wrote a heartbreaking yet beautiful story. Coming in at number 3 is The Hawthorne Legacy and The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. These two books are a continuation of The Inheritance Games, which I read last year and which was in my top books of 2021. So that I don't spoil anything, I'm just going to tell you what The Inheritance Games is about. Avery lives with her sister and is currently in high school. Her current plan is to survive high school and get a scholarship so that she can create a better life for herself. One day, she is at school and is called to the office. This man at the office tells her that she has been summoned to the reading of the will of Tobias Hawthorne. Avery has never met or even heard of Tobias Hawthorne in her life. When Avery goes to the reading of his will, she has learned that she has inherited his billion-dollar fortune. The only catch is that she has to live in his house for a whole year with the rest of his family members living there. When Avery moves in, she learns that Tobias Hawthorne loved clues and that he has hidden clues all over his house. Avery and his 4 grandsons are determined to find the answers in the clues as to why he left Avery his fortune. The Hawthorne Legacy and The Final Gambit is a continuation and ending of this story. These were great books. The storyline was a lot of fun to read. There were many twists and turns. I'm looking forward to reading the other book, The Brothers Hawthorne, that Jennifer Lynn Barnes wrote in this world. I also think it would be really cool if she would write a story based off of the ending of The Final Gambit. Coming in at number 2 is Before Your Memory Fades by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is the 3rd book in the series, and all 3 books can be read as standalones. The first 2 books in the series are Before the Coffee Gets Cold and Tales from the Cafe. In Tokyo, there is a cafe that has been brewing coffee for more than 100 years, but unlike any other coffee shop, this coffee shop allows you to travel back in time. There are 4 time travelers in this book. A daughter who is holding a grudge at her parents for dying and leaving her alone in life, a famous person who wants to tell his deceased wife about an accomplishment, someone who feels they can no longer be happy without their sister, and the final person wants to profess their feelings of love to someone who is sick. But traveling back in time is not as easy as it seems, and there are specific rules you must follow, and if you don't follow these specific rules, it comes with a consequence. The rules are: nothing you do in the past will change the present. You can only meet someone in the past who has visited the cafe, and this is why it's very hard to travel to the future, because you don't know if the person you're visiting in the future will have visited the cafe. You must sit in a specific seat and wait till it is vacant, and it is only vacant once a day. You must stay in the seat you are sitting in, and once the coffee is poured, you must drink all of the coffee before it gets cold, or else you will die. I really loved each story that went back in time. The character developments were incredible. The characters learned so much, but as a reader, you learn just as much from reading their stories. Everything about this book was so heartwarming, and the writing was phenomenal. And my favorite book of the year is Yesterday's Gone by Cindy Woodsmall and Aaron Woodsmall. Eliza Bottrenger and Jesse Ebersol have fallen in love and want to get married, but their families say that if they get married, they will be cursed. On the day of Eliza's wedding, her great aunt Rose gives her a quilt. This quilt has the ability to change one thing about the past, but Eliza doesn't think much of it. A few years later, Eliza has had 3 children and they all have died. She finds out that she is unable to carry healthy children for genetic reasons, and if she were to try for a 4th, there's a possibility that this baby could die as well. As Eliza is grieving the loss of her 3rd child, Penelope, she remembers the quilt and decides that she will use it to travel back in time to reject Jesse's proposal and be saved from all this heartbreak, because she thinks any life is better than the heartbreak they are experiencing right now. Eliza uses the quilt to travel back in time, and now everything is different. The community is different because Jesse never did some of the things in the new timeline that he did in the old timeline. Ruth met her husband at Eliza's wedding, but because Eliza rejected Jesse's proposal, Ruth never met her husband, and now there are drastic changes made in this guy's life as well. Eliza also has a brother named Ben, and in the old timeline he overcame his alcohol addiction, but in this new timeline he's still a struggling alcoholic. In this new timeline, Eliza's father is also dying. The list could go on. Now Eliza has to live in this present timeline that is much worse than the old timeline and wants to return to the old timeline before it is too late. I found this book had a really great perspective on how you view your life. Yes, Eliza went through something hard, but when she saw what the other option was going to be, she wanted her life back regardless of the pain it caused her, because in the end she thought it was worth it, which I think can be a good lesson for us. This book was very powerful and thought-provoking. It definitely reminded me that regardless of what I have walked through, that I wouldn't change it for anything, regardless of how much pain I had to walk through to get where I am now. Thanks for watching this video. If you haven't yet already, make sure to comment some of your favorite reads of 2022 below. Also, make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any future videos I post. Also, make sure to like and share this with anyone you think might enjoy. Thanks for watching!